people often say the best teammates are the ones who aren't afraid to tell you the truth. Just 2 months ago, Jaylen Brown did exactly that when he looked directly into the camera and openly called Joel Embiid a flopper.
Flopping has ruined our game. Joel Embiid is a great player, one of the best bigs in basketball history. Flops. He know it. This ain't breaking news.
Now they're sharing the same locker room, but that's not even the most surprising part of Philadelphia's offseason. While the basketball world was busy arguing over whether the 76ers had pulled off the biggest steal of the summer by landing Jaylen Brown from Boston, a much more important shift was taking place behind closed doors. For the first time since Joel Embiid became the face of the franchise, Philadelphia stopped building its roster around the expectation that he'd remain healthy all season. Instead, the front office finally accepted the reality they've spent years trying to ignore. That mindset changed everything. That's exactly why they made such an aggressive move for Jaylen Brown, and they didn't stop there. They reshaped the supporting cast, rebuilt the bench, and approached this offseason with a completely different philosophy. But if you've been a Sixers fan through years of trust the process, you already know what's coming next. Every offseason brings a fresh wave of optimism. Every year, the expectations rise, and every year, one question refuses to go away. Is this finally the team that breaks through? Or are Sixers fans about to relive the same disappointment all over again? That's the bet Philadelphia is making. This could end up being the franchise's smartest roster move in decades, or it could become another ambitious plan that looks great on paper but ends the same way as before. So what actually changed? Before we focus on Philadelphia, we have to talk about how this entire situation even came together, because the beginning of this story was almost as shocking as the trade itself. The Boston Celtics were actively exploring ways to move Jaylen Brown, the same player who had helped lead them to an NBA championship just 2 seasons earlier. Long before free agency officially began, Boston was contacting teams, discussing possibilities, and seeing what kind of blockbuster deal they could make. At first glance, it made almost no sense. Why would a championship contender even consider trading one of its biggest stars, especially to a division rival that had knocked them out of the playoffs only a couple of months earlier? The answer begins with Giannis Antetokounmpo. As rumors spread that Giannis could eventually become available, Boston believed it had a rare opportunity to land another generational superstar. The Celtics were prepared to pay a massive price, reportedly putting Jaylen Brown and 2 unprotected first-round picks on the table in an aggressive pursuit of Giannis. But the deal never happened. Milwaukee turned down Boston's proposal, and Giannis ultimately ended up with the Miami Heat. Once that opportunity disappeared, there was no easy way for the Celtics to undo what had already happened. The rest of the league now knew something important. Boston was willing to trade one of its franchise cornerstones if it believed a bigger opportunity was out there. For Jaylen Brown, that revelation changed everything, and it wasn't the first time his name had surfaced in major trade conversations. Back in 2022, Brown was also included in discussions with the Brooklyn Nets when Boston explored a potential trade for Kevin Durant. What made the situation even tougher was that Brown never asked to leave. Despite years of speculation, constant rumors, and hearing his name attached to superstar trades, he never requested a move or demanded a fresh start. The decision came entirely from the Celtics front office. After years of building around Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, Boston chose to close that chapter, and like so many NBA players in today's era, Jaylen Brown learned about the end of his Celtics journey through the breaking trade reports rather than a personal conversation.
Then they packed me up, my boy. God, I wasn't thrilled with the amount of respect that was showed during this process. I think there was a bit of a lack.
From Boston's point of view, it's not hard to see how they arrived at this decision. The NBA's new collective bargaining agreement completely reshaped the way championship teams have to operate. Keeping 2 players on supermax contracts isn't just expensive anymore, it's become incredibly restrictive. When the Celtics captured the NBA title in 2024, the combined salaries of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum already took up roughly 47% of the team's salary cap. Fast forward 2 years, after both stars signed enormous contract extensions, and that figure had ballooned to nearly 70%. That financial reality forced Boston into a series of difficult choices. They moved Drew Holiday, parted ways with Kristaps Porzingis, and allowed veterans Al Horford and Luke Kornet to leave in order to stay below the league's second apron and avoid the harsh penalties that come with it. The situation wasn't about talent, it was about the new financial rules. Even Celtics president Brad Stevens, fresh off being named NBA Executive of the Year, addressed it directly during his press conference.
Interesting time. The new CBA coincided, 7 years after the Supermaxes were instituted. We may not be sitting here if there was a rule in the CBA that said the guys that you drafted, that you signed to 35% Supermaxes count as 25% of the cap, because then that would allow you to build out towards the aprons with a lot less flexibility, or with a lot more flexibility. But the reality is that those are hard to build, and you even look back on, and again, I don't want to just throw a bunch of numbers, but like 47% of the cap is what those two guys were when we won it all, right? And that's just going up and up.
As if Boston's situation wasn't already complicated enough, the financial landscape became even tougher. League revenue came in below projections, so the NBA salary cap increased by only 6.7% instead of the 10% many front offices had been planning around. That unexpected change left the Celtics with far less room to maneuver than they had anticipated. Then, on June 26th, NBA insider Shams Charania reported that Boston wanted at least 4 first-round picks as the starting point for any Jaylen Brown trade package, with additional players included if necessary. Around the league, however, that price was viewed as far too ambitious. Brown's enormous contract made many teams hesitant, and his preferred destinations further reduced the number of realistic trade partners. On top of that, once rival executives realized Boston was highly motivated to complete a deal, the Celtics lost much of their negotiating leverage. There was no pressure for teams to act quickly. They could simply wait for Boston's demands to come down. Eventually, that's exactly what happened. That's when Philadelphia stepped in. Just 1 month after replacing Daryl Morey, new executive Mike Gansey made the franchise-altering phone call. According to reports, Gansey didn't believe the roster he inherited was capable of competing for a championship. The team's flexibility had been limited by the difficult contract attached to veteran Paul George, making meaningful improvements extremely challenging. Rather than making another small adjustment, Gansey chose to take a massive swing. Philadelphia reportedly sent Paul George, a 2028 first-round pick that could convert into a more favorable swap, an unprotected 2031 first-round pick, and 2 second-round picks to Boston. In return, the 76ers landed one of the league's premier two-way stars. Jaylen Brown arrived in Philadelphia after arguably the finest season of his career. He averaged 28.7 points, 6.9 rebounds, and 5.1 assists, helping lead Boston to a 56-26 record and the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. His outstanding campaign also earned him a 6th-place finish in MVP voting and a spot on the All-NBA second team. His accomplishments become even more impressive when you remember the circumstances. Jason Tatum spent nearly the entire season recovering from a torn Achilles, and many expected the Celtics to slide down the standings. Instead, Brown carried the team, keeping Boston among the Eastern Conference's elite. He even described it as his favorite season of his career, one he valued even more than the championship run. Looking at everything Brown achieved during his time in Boston only makes the trade feel even more surprising. Over the past decade, no NBA player has been part of more combined regular season and playoff victories than Jaylen Brown. During that stretch, he finished with 6 more total wins than Nikola Jokic, reached the Eastern Conference Finals 6 times, appeared in 2 NBA Finals, captured an NBA championship, and added a Finals MVP trophy to his resume. Considering that resume, it's no surprise the move stunned people across the basketball world. Even Charles Barkley admitted he couldn't believe Boston was willing to let a player of Brown's caliber walk away.
There's so much fake stuff on the internet now. I'm like, no, they didn't trade him to the Sixers. Number one, you're like, wow. And secondly, you're like, well, what they give up? And you're like, they gave up on Paul George and some draft picks. I says, man, the Sixers.
The reaction around the NBA was immediate, and it wasn't exactly flattering for Boston. One anonymous general manager told basketball analyst Jeff Goodman that Philadelphia had completely fleeced the Celtics. Another rival executive told ESPN that Boston's return package was even less valuable than what the Utah Jazz received for Walker Kessler. Across the league, many executives viewed the trade as an overwhelming win for the 76ers. Boston's centerpiece in the deal was Paul George, a 9-time NBA All-Star with an impressive resume. But there were obvious concerns. George was entering his age 36 season after another injury-filled campaign. He hadn't appeared in more than 56 games in any season since before joining the Los Angeles Clippers, was also facing a 25-game suspension, and carried one of the league's largest contracts, earning $54 million this season with a $56 million player option for the following year. During his second season in Philadelphia, George averaged 17.3 points and 5.3 rebounds. Respectable numbers, but far from the production expected from a player with that salary. From Philadelphia's perspective, the move couldn't have worked out much better. The Sixers managed to acquire Jaylen Brown without giving up the type of package most people expected, while also clearing the remaining $110 million tied to George's contract. It was the kind of blockbuster few people saw coming. Even more ironic, the same Jaylen Brown who publicly called Joel Embiid a flopper and told everyone to clip it, is now sharing the same locker room. Whatever tension existed between them has to stay in the past now. If Philadelphia has legitimate championship ambitions, Brown and Embiid don't just need to coexist, they need to become the foundation of a title contender. But the biggest story of the Sixers offseason isn't simply adding another star. It's the way the organization has finally changed its thinking about Joel Embiid. Every major decision Philadelphia made this summer traces back to one unavoidable reality. They can no longer build the roster under the assumption that Embiid will be available every night. The numbers make that impossible to ignore. Over the past 3 seasons, Embiid has appeared in just 96 of a possible 246 regular season games. Missing more than half of the schedule has sparked ongoing questions about his durability, the value of his massive contract, and whether the franchise can realistically compete for a championship with its superstar unavailable so often. Last season was another reminder of those concerns. Embiid played only 38 games as injuries and health setbacks repeatedly interrupted his year. He entered the season already managing a right knee issue, later suffered a stress fracture in his shin during February, then missed another stretch after an oblique strain in March. Just days before the play-in tournament, he woke up in severe pain during the early morning hours and required emergency appendix surgery later that same day. At this point, Philadelphia isn't treating those absences as bad luck anymore. It's planning for them. For years, the Sixers followed the same blueprint. Construct the roster expecting Embiid to play around 65 to 70 games, hope he stayed healthy through the regular season, and pray he was at full strength once the playoffs arrived. That strategy never produced the results they wanted. This offseason marked a major philosophical shift. Instead of assuming Embiid will be available all year, the front office built a roster capable of surviving long stretches without him. That's the real purpose behind their focus on improving depth. Last season alone, 23 different players logged minutes for Philadelphia, while 14 different players made at least one start. After losing Kelly Oubre Jr. and Quentin Grimes in free agency, rebuilding the second unit became a priority. That's where Anfernee Simons comes in. Philadelphia signed Simons to a 2-year, $12 million contract, adding exactly what the bench had been missing: instant scoring. Last season, the Sixers ranked 23rd in the NBA in three-point attempt rate, and their reserve unit struggled to create offense whenever the starters rested. Simons addresses that weakness immediately. Whether he's creating off the dribble, knocking down pull-up jumpers, or spacing the floor as a catch-and-shoot threat, he gives head coach Nick Nurse another dependable offensive weapon. As a reserve last season, Simons ranked 6th in the NBA in made three-pointers off the bench while shooting 38% from beyond the arc, providing the kind of consistent scoring punch Philadelphia lacked. The Sixers also strengthened their defense by signing Dean Wade to a 4-year, $39 million contract. The versatile 6'9" forward isn't a high-volume scorer, but he brings size, defensive versatility, and the willingness to play a complementary role. He was also someone new executive Mike Gansey knew well from their time together in Cleveland, making him a natural fit for Philadelphia's new roster-building vision. Dean Wade brings another valuable element to the roster. His ability to defend multiple positions without needing touches on offense makes him the kind of role player every contender looks for. Philadelphia also added Ariel Hukporti, the 7-foot center fresh off a championship run with the New York Knicks, giving Nick Nurse another reliable option behind Joel Embiid. The Sixers didn't stop there. They also selected Labaron Philon, a rookie many evaluators believed had lottery-level talent. His arrival adds even more youth, athleticism, and upside to a second unit that suddenly looks much deeper than it did a season ago. For the first time in years, Philadelphia has a bench that appears capable of holding and even extending a lead instead of giving it away. What makes this roster even more intriguing is what happened during the playoffs. In the opening round against Boston, Joel Embiid was unavailable for the first 3 games. Philadelphia entered the series as the number 7 seed against a Celtics team that had won 56 games, and most analysts expected Boston to cruise through the matchup. Instead, the Sixers refused to back down. VJ Edgecombe, who later finished 3rd in Rookie of the Year voting, exploded for 30 points and 10 rebounds to help Philadelphia steal Game 2. Tyrese Maxey took over offensively in Game 3, keeping the Sixers competitive even without their franchise center. Then, everything changed. Embiid returned for Games 4 through 7 while still recovering from surgery, yet he still averaged 28 points, 9 rebounds, and 7 assists over the remainder of the series. Behind that effort, Philadelphia pulled off one of the greatest playoff comebacks in league history, becoming just the 4th lowest seed ever to erase a 3-1 series deficit. That series revealed 2 important truths at the same time. First, the Sixers finally showed they could survive stretches without Embiid on the floor. Second, even when he wasn't fully healthy, Embiid remained the most dominant player in the series once the games became do or die. Unfortunately for Philadelphia, the momentum didn't last. The second round against the New York Knicks ended quickly, with the Sixers being swept out of the playoffs. Across that series, Philadelphia managed just over 106 points per 100 possessions, producing some of its weakest offensive performances of the entire season at the moment it mattered most. But perhaps the most concerning statistic has nothing to do with injuries. Since the 2017-18 season, the Sixers have owned the 5th best regular season record in the NBA. On paper, they've consistently been one of basketball's elite teams. The problem begins once the postseason starts. During that same stretch, 19 of the league's 30 franchises have reached at least one conference finals. Philadelphia isn't one of them. 6 of the Sixers' last 9 seasons have ended in the Eastern Conference semifinals, and the organization hasn't advanced to the Eastern Conference Finals since 2001. That's the barrier this franchise is desperately trying to break through, and that's exactly why adding Jaylen Brown could be so significant. Throughout his 10 seasons in Boston, Brown reached the Eastern Conference Finals 6 times. He's played under the brightest lights, experienced deep playoff battles, and delivered in high-pressure situations year after year. Even more impressive is how little his performance changes when the stakes rise. During the regular season, Brown has averaged 20 points per game while posting a 57% true shooting percentage. In the playoffs, those numbers remain almost identical at 19.6 points per game on 57.4% true shooting. Very few stars maintain that level of consistency once postseason defenses tighten and every possession carries extra weight. That reliability helps explain another remarkable achievement. Over the last decade, Jaylen Brown has appeared in more playoff games than any other NBA player. He's already lived through the moments Philadelphia has spent years chasing. Still, no matter how talented the supporting cast becomes, or how valuable Brown's playoff experience proves to be, the Sixers' championship hopes ultimately come down to one question. Can Joel Embiid finally stay healthy when the calendar turns to April and May? For the first time in a long time, though, the Sixers finally have a star beside Joel Embiid who has already been through the pressure and come out the other side. The strategy is pretty straightforward. Get somewhere between 45 and 55 regular season games from Embiid, build enough depth to survive the nights he misses, and hope that the version of him who reaches the playoffs is healthy enough to carry the team when it matters most. That's where Jaylen Brown becomes so important. He can take on a larger scoring role when Philadelphia needs offense. He can create opportunities next to Tyrese Maxey. And on the other end, he gives the Sixers another high-level perimeter defender, especially if he isn't forced to carry the entire offense every possession. But that leads to the biggest question Philadelphia still has to answer. As talented as Brown is, his fit with this roster is not automatic. He hasn't consistently played alongside an elite, ball-dominant point guard since Kyrie Irving's final season in Boston, and he's never shared the floor with a dominant interior presence like Joel Embiid. Last season, Brown finally had the opportunity to show he could function as Boston's primary offensive option while Jason Tatum was sidelined. If that experience changed what he wants from the next phase of his career, Philadelphia may not be able to offer the same role. When Embiid is healthy, Brown will probably be asked to operate behind both Embiid and Maxey in the offensive hierarchy. In some ways, that could be a smaller role than the one he grew into before leaving Boston. So how do three stars, all accustomed to initiating offense, make this partnership work? Brown posted a 36.2% usage rate last season, one of the highest marks among qualified NBA players. Embiid has never finished a season below a 33% usage rate. Maxey has hovered around 29 to 30% over the last 2 years. Those are three players whose games have been built around having the ball in their hands. And there is still only one basketball. The challenge becomes even more obvious when you look at Philadelphia's shot profile from last season. Both Embiid and Maxey ranked among the league's worst in shot quality, often creating offense late in the shot clock against set defenses. Adding another high-usage scorer does not automatically solve that problem. If nobody is willing to move without the ball, cut, space the floor, and sacrifice touches, the offense could become even more difficult to organize. Still, from a pure talent perspective, this was a move Philadelphia almost had to make. The Sixers essentially turned an aging, injury-prone Paul George into a 29-year-old All-NBA caliber player who is still in the middle of his prime. Opportunities like that rarely become available. The bigger concern is the financial commitment that comes with it. Brown is owed approximately $57 million this season, $61 million next season, and $65 million the year after that. He will also be eligible for another massive extension when this contract ends. When you combine Brown's deal with Joel Embiid's max extension and Tyrese Maxey's contract, Philadelphia is looking at roughly $500 million committed to three players. This season alone, those contracts account for nearly $156 million against a salary cap of about $165 million, and that's before paying almost anyone else on the roster. The first tax apron is around $209 million, and after using their mid-level exceptions on Dean Wade and Anfernee Simons, the Sixers are already hard-capped at that number. That creates serious limitations. Philadelphia will not have access to the full taxpayer mid-level exception. Buyout options in February become much harder to pursue, and if this roster is not working by Christmas, there may be very little flexibility to make major adjustments. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoy in-depth NBA stories and basketball breakdowns like this one, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video.